the camera. There we go. Perfect. Now, first things first. Step one. Step one. You're going to get your socks, all of your socks, one or two, however many you have, and you need to flip them inside out. We always work with the ugly side first. So everyone, grab your socks, and we're going to flip it. Flip, flip, flip. If you don't have a sock and you're like, man, I wish I had a sock, grab a sock from the front. They're up here. In the box. Grab a sock. Grab whichever one you want. So you gotta flip it.
Hey, Naya, do you still want me to do it even though I haven't?
Just watch. Yeah, just watch it. Yeah. Alfredo, are you on your phone? Okay. I just get nervous when everyone's looking down. Now, here's the tricky part. Some of you have brought your own socks in. Let's say it's a fuzzy sock. How do I know if it's inside out or if it's right side out? How do I know which side is the pretty side? There's a telltale sign. Yes, depending. But where is that telltale stitch? On the toe. Yeah. So, this happens. I have to stop at least 2 students every class period. You gotta make sure that it's inside out. So when you have a sock that has a pattern, for instance, obviously we can tell which one's inside out and which one's the pretty side. Like this one's really, really easy. You always have to have the ugly side showing because that's what we're going to draw. We don't want anyone to see our drawing parts. Okay? When it's a sock like this, you kind of have to look for the toe. Every time, every sock, there's always some weird like toe stitches. And I know this doesn't seem like it should matter, but when we flip it and we stump it and it's all the pretty side, there's this weird edge on like the head of your animal, head of your monster. So make sure you flip it. Flip it. Now, our next part, step 2. Step 1 is always to flip your socks. Fatima, Michaela. Step 2, we're going to start to draw. But before you guys draw on your socks, because once we draw, the chalk should wipe away depending on the color. But I want to show you some options, just things to think about. So first thing, we all made our pin cushion. Everything's going to get smaller. Everything's going to get smaller. We all started off with the same size fabric. After you sew, it just gets little. These two guys, exact same pieces. So, I was making spikes for one of my other little projects. This and this, they're identical. The only difference is this one's sewn and flipped. So when you guys start to draw, just remember that. If you make a really, really tiny arm, think about your pillow, your little pincushion. When you sewed it and you try to flip it and you're like, oh my God, that's so tiny. You always want to draw a little bit bigger. Or draw the size you want, but don't cut them. Cut bigger. And I'll show that when we start drawing on our socks. So remember, size changes. It gets smaller. Next thing, are you using the heel? Is the heel going to be the head? Are you using it for the booty, a belly? Is it going to be the mouth? How you cut and draw for this, it really just depends. Like for me, I'm going to have my sock facing like normal. I'm going to follow the curve and then complete the circle. So that way I have a nice round head. When that comes out though, he kind of has this little scar down the middle. But it gives him this really nice round little like face shape. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. The other way is to do this. If I wanted to do more like a little Among Us character, here's the face, right? I would trim off that top part to give him the top of the head. What that looks like is this little guy. So he gets this cool little mask, but then he has this little surgical part right there. A lot of students don't like it. I'll have students often make hats to cover that up. Doesn't matter. Totally up to you. But just depending on where you cut is how they will start to take shape. So I kind of wanted to show you a few examples if you want to have the heel as the head. You can either cut it like this little guy. You're just going to cut the top right above the heel. Or you'll do what I'm going to do. Keep the sock like normal. And you'll just follow the curve and you'll have this little incense right there. So that's if you're using the heel as the head. If you want the heel as, let's say, the booty, anything like that, it's always going to be in relation to the rest of the body. So, for instance, here's this little guy. It looks like it's on an operating table. Anywho, this is the heel. He wanted a really, really like bulbous kind of face. He wanted it to stick out and he wanted the rest of it to be flat. This is the entire sock. He basically cut one end and just cut the other end. What you guys have to think about is face to body to legs proportions. So if we had his version, if we look at this little guy, this is basically him without being stuffed. How much? Do you want his legs to be that long? Maybe not. Maybe you're going to trim it. Do you want his little ears to be that long? Maybe not. Maybe you're going to trim up here. It's kind of just deciding where everything's going to go. For this guy, the heel was going to be the mouth. So his head's up here. This is the body and then the legs. So slightly different. You don't have to have it attached the way it looks. Oh, hold on, guys.
Hello, Mr. Junior, room 140.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Angelina, you're going home. You have to go to attendance though, Angelina. Yeah. Okay. So, this student really, really wanted like side chongos, but she didn't want it to look like a bunny. So what she did, just like before, she had her sock, but she just cut off that part. Here's that heel. She made the mouth. And then after she sewed it, she attached them to the side. So you kind of pick and choose where you want things to go. The rest of the body is just like this one. Really, really long legs. The arms are attached after. Fatima Michaela. But you're going to have to kind of decide when you draw your sock where things are going to go. Because remember, everything's going to get smaller, even though it looks really big in the beginning. Now, when you start to draw on your sock, you're going to have leftover parts. So for instance, with me, this is pretty much the head. I'm going to trim for the body. And I still have toe. I still have the rest of this. This might be arms. I could do ears. I could do horns down here. Use up the sock if you can. Or maybe you just need a brand new sock. My little character, I'm going to use at least 3 socks. Today you guys are going to get your other socks if you still need one. So if you got one from me, you're going to go ahead and get the rest of them that you need. Everyone in the class, all my classes have gotten some. So you're going to grab your second pair. One thing, the last thing before we start drawing ours, is you can draw what you want to cut, so you actually cut the sock, or draw it and don't cut it. So let me show you my little fingers. So I really, really want my character to have fingers, but to cut those little rainbows, those little curves, it would be horrible to try to hold my fabric and try to sew. So all I did was just kind of space out, make those cuts, and then I sewed it that way. I sewed it to be round. So what it looks like when it comes out is this little guy. You don't have to cut everything, especially if it's going to be tiny. So what a lot of my students really like is having the head come in, give it a little bit of a neck, and then have the body. Same thing with this little guy. He has kind of this round head, he comes in, and then the body. It's really, really simple. You just sew almost like Chanel C's, like a little C, to give it just that little bit in. Because when we flip it, it'll be stuck. And if you guys want this to happen like a little net, I'll show you. Because not everyone does. Some people want just a straight up and down head to body, which is fine. But if you want it to curve a little bit more, we won't cut it, we'll sew it in that shape. And then when you flip it, it takes that kind of like that, a bit of a indent in. Okay, get your sock. We are going to draw on our sock right now with our chalk. If your sock is black and you have the white chalk, you might just have to really like hold the sock and draw on there. It takes a little bit of time. Okay? What we're sewing first, not sewing, what we're drawing first is just the body. My little character, I'm going to use the heel as the head. I'm going to follow the curve. Again, I want this, my little guy, to have this kind of stitch. I don't want him to have that little like back of the head stitch. So I have my sock facing this way. I'm following the curve. So there you can start to kind of see my little head taking shape. Now, when I talk to you guys about like, hey, you might need to draw bigger than what you actually want, sometimes what helps us just in our brain, draw how you actually want your project to look. This is it. I want the head to be this size, no bigger. When I go to cut tomorrow we're cutting, I'll cut farther away. And then on that line, that's where I'll sew. Because it's kind of just like when we did our pin cushion. Wherever you sew, that's what comes out. You know, I did that really weird pin cushion wherever I threw it. Wherever you sew, that's going to be the shape. So, if I cut further away, I can sew here and it'll save it. Now for my sock, I'm also going to have his body be a little bit shorter and round. So he's kind of finished. I need to get my other sock, so that way I can start doing arms, legs, things like that. Well, and don't forget too, so, Emmanuel, I'm going to steal your question. Here's my head, here's the bottom of my body. I'll cut the legs from up here, because I'm just going to cut this whole entire thing off. I'll cut all the way down. And then I'm going to attach these after. So basically, I'm just getting as much fabric as I can out of one entire sock. Now, I don't want my legs this big. I want them to be skinnier, but I can sew them skinnier. If I cut them too small, it's just going to be a trial. It's going to be too hard. Like, for instance, this student, I talked to her about cutting her feet too small, and she was like, no, they're going to be little. And I was like, yeah, but that's like little. Draw bigger than what you need. Okay? I'm going to come around. I'm going to put on the lights. I'm going to help you guys where you need help. Okay? No one is doing pin cushion today. We're all going to be drawing. If you haven't done your planning stages yet, do that right now. Okie dokie. Okie dokie.